Hello guys, in this video I'm going to explain to you phosphate removers, phosphates in general, and why you might want to use a phosphate remover to get phosphates out of your pool. Phosphates, the main problem with phosphates in your pool, they're a polyatomic ion, and the main problem with them is that they are food for algae. Okay, so they're algae food, okay? A lot of times if you're cleaning your pool and you notice that you have a lot of algae blooms continuously, no matter how often you shock it, it seems like you're always having problems with recurring algae. Phosphates might be a problem for you, so you're gonna test those. So where do phosphates come from? Phosphates come from, their sources include, generally speaking, fertilizer in the soil. That's one source, that's a common source. If I could spell that, I think I got it. All right, fertilizer in the soil. Another place that you could get phosphates a lot of times, some of the best metal sequestrants are phosphates. So if you're adding metal sequestrants to your pool to get metals out or like metal stains out, a lot of times those will have phosphates, okay? So, so we could say the phosphates in metal sequestrants because of the chemical composition of it. Okay, so these are your two main sources, right? Okay, so how do you test for phosphates? You can get a test for phosphates where you take test strips and you put them in a tube, and you have to kind of like slowly move the tube, and it basically produces like a blue dye, and then you compare that blue dye with a test bottle to see how high your phosphates are. If your phosphates are, generally speaking, for tests, right, anything under 500 parts per million, so we're gonna say less than 500 parts per million is good, okay? If it's greater than 500 parts per million, generally you have a problem and you need to resolve that by using a phosphate remover, okay? Actually, I have a client right now where that's exactly what we're doing. Hers are 600, so hers are bad. She's been having recurring algae problems, despite tons and tons of shock. Okay, so that's how you test it. How do you get it out of the pool? There's two ways. There's two chemicals that you can use to get it out of your pool. And they both involve heavy metals. So you can use aluminum sulfate, right? So our interventions, right, are one of them is aluminum sulfate. I think I'm spelling this right. Aluminum sulfate, is our chemical compound, if I remember correctly. SO4, 3, right? Aluminum sulfate, when you add that to the water, it undergoes a chemical reaction, right? I'm not gonna write the whole chemical reaction out, but the end product is aluminum phosphate, which is AlPO4. PO4. Okay, so basically, okay, so yeah, so before I get into the details, so that's aluminum sulfate. Your other option is anthem of chloride. Anthanum chloride. Okay, so anthem chloride is going to be LaCl3 converts to LaPO4. Okay, so these are your two options, okay? Now, how do you determine between each of these? Okay, so both of these are going to get the phosphates out of the water. They bind to the phosphate, right? This is your phosphate group. Ultimately, it's going to bind to that. It's going to take it. It's going to make it insoluble in the water. So it makes it from being soluble to insoluble. So it gets it out of the water. You're going to use, the biggest difference between these two is that if you go the aluminum sulfate route, you're going to actually have to, it's going to bind onto the phosphates, and it's going to sink everything to the bottom of the pool. It's like a flocculant. That's what a flocculant is. It takes everything, grabs it, sinks it to the bottom. Okay. Once it's on the bottom, it takes it out of, it precipitates it, takes it out of solution. You're going to have to vacuum that out of the pool. Okay. So if you have a vacuum and you know how to vacuum things to waste, this is a good option. This is also going to reduce your pH. Okay. So the big factor is you got to vacuum to waste, right? If you're okay with doing that, you might want to go this route. Acts as a flocculant for not just the phosphate, but for other things in the water too. It has that property. It's going to reduce the pH of your water, right? So that's kind of another downside, right? It's going to reduce your pH pretty significantly. So maybe that's not a problem if you have high pH, but if you have low pH, this might be an issue. Something to keep in mind. Okay. You can't use this on saltwater pools. Okay. It's not for saltwater pools. Okay, so those are your four things that you want to consider. Now, Anthem of Chloride is a little different. This often goes by the name of phosphate. You might have seen this before. This is the one that I use. I tend to use the Anthem of Chloride. It's phosphate. Benefits of this one are you don't have to vacuum to waste. You just have to backwash. You let the filter process it. You add it directly to the skimmer. You pour it into the skimmer. It's like a milky liquid. You pour it into the skimmer, and then it binds to the phosphates, and then it takes that and goes to the filter. And then all you have to do is you have to just backwash the filter. Okay. So if you prefer backwashing, which who wouldn't, you know, it's super convenient. You know, it just takes a couple minutes, right? Especially if you have a sand filter. This one, you don't have to vacuum it because it doesn't flock the pool. It's not a flocculant. So just backwash it. Has that benefit. It's a 1-to-1 ratio with phosphates. So you have to use less of it, in other words. We could say phosphate chemical ratio, right? Okay, so that's the other benefit. Also, benefit of this is it does not reduce your pH. Doesn't reduce your pH, so you don't have to worry about if your pH is high or not. You just put it in and it's gonna work regardless. Okay, and then the one downside it does have is it is a little more expensive. Okay, so that's maybe downside. This is a little bit less expensive, not a whole lot less. I mean, you're only talking about $30, right, for a bottle of this, and this is probably like, I don't know, 15, 20. So I'm not talking huge amounts here, but it's more than worth it. If you have phosphates in your pool, I mean, what's $30, right? 2 bags of shock. I mean, yeah, probably more than that, but you know, case of shock is going to cost you that. You're going to go through multiple cases over the life of your pool if you have phosphates in there. So it's worth getting them out, right? So yeah, so those are basically some of the properties of things you can do. At the end of the day, I think it's worth getting the phosphates out. It's worth definitely checking them, testing them with those test strips. And then if you have to go with one, I probably would go with this one. You can look at pretty much any pool store. You'll see Phosphate is the brand that I like to use. So hopefully that helped you guys. Happy swimming. And yeah, see you guys in the next one.